This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. I'm your host, Rabanzo. This podcast features conversations with me and indie music artists. Conversations intended to help other indie musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. So, as you know, I love sharing my personal experience and the things I'm learning from other musicians and songwriters here on the podcast. And you also know that you can be privy to those learnings by joining the Unstarving Musician community. In the process, you probably also know you'll be supporting this podcast. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com to join. In doing so, you'll get an email from me usually every 7 to 10 days with tips, hacks, insights, tricks, all the things you need to know to make your music journey a little better and brighter. And you'll also get a free gift from me, a token of my appreciation for being part of the Unstarving Musician movement. Cam Gillette is an artist of sound design. I can tell that he loves words, too. He says he writes what could be many songs to end up with just one song. How did I find him? His publicist contacted me, which was awesome. As I dug into his work, I saw what appeared to be a solo artist, even though his online presence gives the appearance of a band. That band is smoke from all the friction. What I found is a very creative individual who thinks a great deal about how to create the perfect band, how to find the right personnel. He has an interesting thought process that is actually pretty connected to his creative style and process. He happens to be a software nerd, which I suspect is a bit of a curse. I believe his tendency is to overthink much of his art, but somehow he appears to rein it all in and make it work. I really enjoyed learning this about him and exploring it with him. Like a lot of my guests and listeners, Cam is a DIY kind of guy, and like pretty much all of my guests, he recognizes the value of collaboration. In addition to his approach and theories on the ever-changing landscape of music and entertainment, Cam and I also talk about the value and challenge of being yourself for community building. Like me, Cam struggles to just do it, where putting yourself out there or putting himself out there is concerned. Funny thing is, we both know that our respective tribes love this kind of thing. Everybody wants inside our weird little worlds, and I'm not just talking about me and Cam here, hint, hint. His music is complex, but underneath is a kind of elegant simplicity, otherwise known as pop sensibility. Okay, I think that is a setup worthy of an eclectic artist and a conversation that I hope you will enjoy and learn from. The track you'll hear at the end of our conversation comes from his 2018 release, Transients, and it's called Cross and Tattoo. Here's my conversation with Cam Gillette. What is your main hub for online presence? Do you guys typically direct people to Facebook or and Instagram?
Yeah, so that kind of like moves into like a bigger idea that we try to deal with. Is the answer is right now, well, the practical answer to your question is like Facebook and Instagram, they're two different communication platforms that they have a lot of overlap, but they also have their specific purpose for doing things. So the actual answer to your question is Instagram and Facebook. But I mean, I think the goal of what I try to do as an artist is see where the culture is and the people that I'm trying to interact with and trying to communicate with, and find the best way to speak their language, whatever it is. So someone who lives on Instagram is different, and like their goals for being on that platform are probably different for the reasons I'm being on any other platform, Facebook or otherwise. And so the people that gravitate to each of these different platforms are probably looking for something slightly different. So our messages are slightly catered to the platform so we can best express and connect with the people that are there.
Okay, so short answer, yes, but I do like that anyway, because it speaks to the fact that you're very aware of the differences in the audiences, even though so ironically and oddly they are owned by the same people that we bitch about a lot.
Yeah, sure. Our lizard overlord.
Yep. Okay. Do you write poetry or prose outside of what you write for your songs?
Not really. Like I write a whole lot in the sense that I kind of mostly with the end goal of it turning into a song. But I mean, I'll probably start 30 different like sections of lyrics to every song, to every section that actually gets into a song somehow. Mm-hmm. Poetry to me, I never really connected. I didn't get it. I'm slowly like dabbling with it now, but it just it's just I never really. It's almost like a lot of visual art. Like there's a couple of poets and there's a couple of visual artists that I'm like, okay, I think I get this. But the rest of them, I'm like, I feel like there's not enough context for me to understand what they're saying. Like if I see a painting, I'm like, okay, it's a painting. But if I then talk to the artist, and the artist explains to me like, this symbolizes this, and I gives context to the reasons why they did it. I'm like, okay, I love this painting now because I understand. But I find, I guess, the mediums of poetry is a little bit limiting for me, and so I guess I just don't gravitate to that. I kind of what I like music, because you can kind of give a little bit more context to, like, a little bit more information than just a simple word. So not really.
Well, I can relate on the poetry front, especially. And oddly enough, I was at a writing workshop this morning, and it's just something I'm kind of doing for fun. I have to write for various things weekly, and I thought this would be good. It's predominantly geared toward fiction writers, which I don't know that I'm ever going to do that, but I know it's also pitched for people who like to write poetry. And to me, I was like, oh, I never thought of that, because I'm a little like you in that, like, I don't quite get it. Maybe for different reasons, but it was oddly enough, it was a very small workshop today, but one of the deal is we do have a prompt, and we'll do some writing exercises in, and about one of the people there wrote something that sounded just like a poem, because she started with the prompt in every couple of phrases. So, but I totally get it. Yeah, I asked you the questions because I noticed in kind of trolling your social media, and I think there were possibly some stories I saw on social media, or listened to rather, and it sounds like you are a prolific writer of lyrics or words anyway, and it made me want to know if you did poetry or prose for books or anything, but it's predominantly for songs. But anyway, yeah, thanks. Good to know. I would also like to know about the evolution of your band Smoke from All the Friction. A little bit about the current lineup, if you will, and the evolution, because it looks, I asked this one because it looks like there has been an evolution, maybe, and tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe it started out one way, and now you're at a different place with what looks like a three-piece, and I don't know if that's exactly still where you are, but could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Sure. So my methodology on this is, I've been playing music for a while, and I guess maybe 15 years or something, and I don't know if you've ever played with bands, but typically this is how, if you're a band leader and you're trying to find other people, you're basically asking someone to have a semi-full-time, semi-part-time job with no guarantee of pay and little artistic expression, and they need you to be reliable, they need you to be invested, they need you to be talented, and they need you to not say stuff when they don't want you to. That seems like a lot to ask of someone at any era, but in 2018, that's just not how the world works. And I think that's what a lot of people want from their band members. And I'm like, I think that's wholly unrealistic. So I'm like, all right, so how can I work around this problem that I need people to work with? I need people to make my visions happen. And I want to give other people a platform so they can get their goals established. And I've done it poorly a lot, to the point where I think I do it okay now. I call it a modular mindset, in the sense that, okay, so I'm going to write these songs, I'm going to do all these different things. And I have these 20 different roles that I need done. So be these live, be these in the studio, be these whatever it is. I need somebody to play these instruments. And so if I can find somebody, I talk to them. It's like, hey, this is what I need from you, and this is what I can offer. And I say, hey, what do you want from me, and what can you offer? Like, it's almost kind of business-like, and it's a little cold, but like, I want to make sure that you're getting what you want. If I can't offer you what you want, then we probably shouldn't work together, and vice versa. And assuming that conversation goes well, I go, all right, well, here's the 20 different, I call them modules, that I need done. I need somebody to play guitar on this song. I need somebody to help me produce here. I need somebody to sing whatever. So these different things. And I'm like, which of these can you do? And they're like, all right, well, I can commit to these, and I can't do these other ones. And so with the modules that are left, I pick up all the ones that I can. And with the ones that are left after that, I leave technology I call it cheating, but leave technology to take care of. So if I have the synth part that both of us are playing three other things at the same time, then I let a computer play it. Or I automate something in the studio, so I try to have this modular mindset. So if somebody wants to work with me, I'm like, here's these different modules that I need, and you can take them, you can own them, you can do whatever you want with them. But it kind of allows people to be able to commit to the specific things that they want and what they're capable of, and so everybody's expectations are met pretty early on, and nobody enters with false expectations for the most part. So that's like a overarching methodology, I guess, because I'm trying to figure out how to make a band work in 2018 or not 2019. Is I mean, there's no precedent, you know? And so we're basically trying to build something that will work with how millennials and youngers work nowadays, you know? So as far as actually answering your question, my current live setup is I have one guy who's working with me. He plays like bass, guitar, some synthesizer. He does some backing vocals and does some percussion. Basically, depending on the song, he does a bunch of different stuff. And so it's just the two of us live right now. Like I've kind of gotten through, we've had some people leave and kind of following this modular mindset, it makes it easier for people to leave. They're like, if at any point their life gets busy or they can't do these things to what they want, it's easy for us to have a conversation saying like, hey, I don't think I can offer you what you need right now, or I don't think you're offering me what you need right now. And we go, okay, that's a bummer. We'll miss you, but like, it's totally fine. So it kind of allows us to, because a lot of people don't have an exit strategy and then they kind of feel trapped and then they feel resentful, and that's just not a good relationship to have of any kind. So right now it's just the two of us, but I mean, as soon as we find somebody who wants to work in and can fit with the expectations that we've set and we can make their goals happen, then we'll add them, you know?
Yeah, I think that's smart. I have spoken on the podcast with a lot of songwriters, and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them in the folk and Americana sort of arena. But inevitably, when I speak to them about band situations, like recent conversation, there's a guy who has like this side project. It's a trio that plays heavy music, and they get together when they can. They seem to really love it. But I've talked to several of them who will, they want to tour, or they found some guys who probably maybe the same ones that they tour with, they like to record with. But there seems to be an overarching theme of, and maybe your modular mindset is the exact same thing, sort of framed out a little bit differently, and possibly because you have as much tech in your music as you do, but the overarching mindset for them is just like, I want you to have fun. I want you to get out of it what you want out of it, and it has been a learning process for all of them as well. And some of them, I'm sure, some of them older than you, some of them around your age. So it seems to be kind of you just described a learning process. I think I've talked to a lot of other guys about, but I recently, I moved. I mentioned to you before I dropped the proverbial needle on our conversation here, but that I live in Panama. Moved here a couple of years ago, and to an area where there was no music scene. But I recently got pulled into a band that's just doing some covers, but they're pretty creative with what they do. But the guy who runs it, he said the same thing. If everyone's happy, let's keep doing it. I'm like, I like that. So I think that's smart what you're doing.
Thank you.
So transients, did I say that right? I didn't look up the spelling, but when I look at the title of your latest album, something looks funny to me about the spelling, but that may just be because I've never used the word in a sentence.
Yeah, super normal dialogue. It's transient.
Yeah. So, did you record that? Did you have any of? It looks like you somewhat recently had a trio. Did any of those? Were those other two folks involved, or is it just you, or is it the guy you're currently with?
So it's not the guy I'm currently with, but most of that album I wrote myself. I basically did everything on it myself. There's some backing vocals. If a female singing, it's definitely not me. My old drummer, he recently moved to California, but he helped me produce a little bit on it. Kind of like I'll get the song to like 80% there, and I get stuck, and I just keep spending hours trying to get it, and I'm like, I need somebody to like break me out of my box here. So he did some producing on that. I guess it was probably and I had some guest vocalists on, and that did some collaboration, but it was mostly them just singing what I sent them. So I was a little bit more of an island than I would prefer to be on it. I mean, the advantage of being an island is that you have complete creative control. The disadvantage is that it takes forever because you have to do 20 jobs, and
sure.
And so kind of one of the methodologies trying to follow in this band, in both my life and this band, is intentionally introducing friction, which is where the band name comes from. Friction is when two forces rub together and create energy that neither of them would ever create by themselves. And so using the idea like and intentionally imposing another force upon me that forces me to create an energy that I never would otherwise. And that can be just like something, I'm like, I have to write the song using only this keyboard, or I have to only use 10 tracks, or I have to write a song that feels forlorn. Or it can be like, I'm going to work with another person, or I'm going to work with this producer, or try to do but intentionally having putting a very directed source of energy, and not quite conflict, but a little bit of conflict to see what you can create. Because like the more you isolate yourself, there's advantages to it. And I do a lot of it, but like complete isolation, like really limits you and allows you to kind of like sit in your own like character flaws and your own inadequacies a little bit too easily. And just having those external frictions forces you to examine things that you wouldn't see because your brain's kind of just coping a little bit.
Sure. Wow. You spend too much time thinking about all this. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But you do put a lot of thought into it. It reminds me a little bit of something I saw a few years ago, at least, I guess, about Jack White. It was probably that Say It Loud documentary or maybe something else. But he was talking about his enjoyment at the time of playing instruments that were not difficult from a technical standpoint, but they were just like, they might be a substandard instrument, so he would struggle to get some, like you just described it. I didn't hear him describe it exactly like that, but he wanted to force it to sound good for his recording. So that is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's a bit of a critique on my own assessment on today's culture, is that we got to the point where such a prosperous and like evolved society that like we can effectively isolate ourselves from like so much outward interaction. Like it's pretty easy if you follow the typical hierarchy of go to college, get an average job, then you can go home, watch Netflix, and no one's going to critique your life. And you can interact on social media in a completely non-social way. So you feel social, but you don't have anybody pushing against you. And you do that long enough, it makes you really isolated from the world and completely unaware of it. And I was like, man, I kind of do this in my music as well as my personal life. Like, what if we lived in a society where people like we're like trying to have themselves evolve by intentionally interacting with external forces that they know will push them in ways that they can't predict. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. I have been thinking about that a little bit in perhaps much different ways in the current band that I'm working with that I mentioned. I mean, every group of people that you work with has some challenges, and my predominant instrument has always been drums, and for me, I always feel like, hey, my job is to make everyone else sound better. But I get it. The challenges of working with other people, and certainly for a drummer, there's really, if I want to just stay focused on drums, there are things I could do nowadays more than years past, but having such a love for playing live, it just really requires getting together with some other people. Are you still enjoying playing live? So you've got the two personnel set up, yourself included. Is that something you plan to do a lot of in 2019?
I'm trying to, not a lot of, I'm basically like, maybe this is a lot. I don't know. Like I'm trying to limit shows to about every 3 weeks. Cause I got to the point like last year where it was basically just surviving show to show. I was like, I don't feel like these are getting any better. I'm just kind of doing it because you're supposed to do it. It was like, no. Like I want every show I have to be an event of some sort. Like live music, it's not the 90s anymore. Like for you to warrant people leaving their houses and doing something, I want to provide an experience that they couldn't get at home. I'm trying to like kind of lower the barrier entry to that by having like a really almost not quite a spectacle, but it'd be an experience. And so, but to be an experience, it can't be happening too often.
Yeah. Yep, I get it.
So I'm trying to like limit to like about 3 weeks so I can like each show is like, first of all, an honest expression of what I'm trying to create, because that kind of requires some like mental preparation over time. And if I do too much, I can't really be honest.
Sure. And that's a very pleasant frequency for doing shows, in my opinion. So you're doing stuff on average a little more than once a month, and that's good, I think. Do you predominantly, I guess the other thing about maybe limiting your performances, do you predominantly play in the somewhat immediate area to where you're located? And that is Raleigh, North Carolina, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's North Carolina is at least in the last 10 years, I'll go 10-ish years, not exactly a forefront music mecca, but the reality is I think live music is in a bit of a transient state like right now.
It is.
That cause electronic music, like meaning like festivals and DJs and stuff, it's like taken over, and that's like an extremely good, like just a different experience than going to a rock show. And I think rock has gotten lazy and standard. And what made rock and roll interesting was that it was a bit of forbidden. It was trying to challenge the status quo. It obviously did a lot of things sloppy because of that, but it also did a lot of things that were innovative because it was like kind of a rebellious mindset in music. And I think rock is almost completely absent of that, of its original mindset. And so like I was saying, it used to be like it was like Nirvana or something, or Led Zeppelin or Poison. These guys worked in their eras because they were controversial in some way, and they offered an experience that like nobody else was doing at the time. And most bands don't do that. They just kind of rehash what worked when they were kids, you know? And so I'm trying to figure out what can work in Raleigh, North Carolina, which means you basically have to try 600 things and see what sticks.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation though on rock. And between the number of artists that, well, you know, the publishing music and your creativity's become accessible for the masses, right? So there's so many people doing it, and then there are just so many forms of entertainment that there just weren't the choices. Even 10 years ago, but you go a little farther back and the choices were much more limited. So live music itself was just a bigger event. But I think that's a good observation that you have on rock music. Maybe it has gotten a little lazy. So yeah, so I had asked the question about performing in your immediate area. Obviously, limiting your performances locally can be a good thing as well to kind of keep yourself fresh in the minds of the audience. So you're kind of genrefied, at least in my reading. At least one of the catchphrases that captures what you've been doing or what you did on your recent release of Transients is moody electronic pop with industrial overtones.
Yeah, that's real catchy, huh?
Yeah. And I gathered that there was one influence. I don't know if I would have pulled it out all by myself, but I read somewhere that you are fairly influenced by Trent Reznor. And then, you know, after I read that, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see that. What about the more pop side? Where are your influences, do you think, there?
It comes from a weird place because, like, this is a quote I use a lot, and I've said it a number of times, and I've heard it a bunch of times, is a lot of musicians make fun of pop music. They're like, oh, it's only 4 chords. And I used to say that and make fun of it for, I'm sure, some pretentious reasons. And basically this band my brain was like, if it's so easy, write a good pop song. That's kind of the what burst this band. I was like, okay. And I tried. I was like, wow, this is really difficult because you have so few options and to honestly express yourself with so few tools. It's so limiting. And I guess as far as it's more of I trying to listen to music from an emotional standpoint, meaning that, like, what kind of genre of music I like? I like music that makes me feel this way. And so my quest when I listen to music is not focused on a genre, but focused on a feeling. Like, be that Katy Perry or be that Cannibal Corpse. Like, what does this music make me feel? And usually it's nothing. But sometimes I can find bands that's like, wow, I don't even want to know what you're singing about. I don't want to hear an interview with you. This music makes me feel this way. And I like that. And so early on when I was younger, I listened to a lot of like pop punk emo stuff. And it's definitely not a mecca of it's not like very artistic or anything, but if nothing else, the genre nails feeling very well. It's usually a very childish, like 14-year-old just broke up with your girlfriend kind of feeling, but it is, you feel from it. It's like, okay, so how can I take, like, I almost like research in a way. I'm like, I listen to this music, like, how can I recreate this feeling? I don't care about any of the instrumentation. I don't care about anything else there. But so again, I'm kind of dancing around your question a little bit because that's my methodology. As far as lately, things that have, I guess I've found music that actually feels to me. There's this band called the 1975. I think a lot of their stuff it's very girl centric. Like, clearly you're writing music to girls, but either way, I'm like, I don't even care what the song's about. It makes me feel this way. How can I learn from that? And Trent Reznor, the Nine Inch Nails, makes me feel a certain way.
Yeah, I get that.
So as far as pop influence, it's 1975. I listen to a lot of Chainsmokers. I'm not really a fan in the sense of it's clearly meant to be, it's like bubblegum pop for 14-year-old girls, but like, and Taylor Swift, like these guys, they can write a song that is very intentional and does exactly what they want it to do. And that is a very difficult thing to do in any genre. So I try to remain agnostic a little bit to the source of it. If they can create the feeling, then that's the music I want to listen to.
I can relate again. I generally don't listen to lyrics. I mean, I listen to the melody of lyrics. I listen to the melody of everything, and of course, if it's got cool drums in it, I'm really liking it. I do love guitar too, so I'm a little biased to songs that have some sort of prominent guitar. Not always, but I'm totally into the way the melody of a song makes me feel. My wife, I'll stereotype her, but she will always listen to the lyrics and the meaning of it. She will decide whether or not she likes a song based on the lyrics. Sometimes there are enough elements outside of that, if the lyrics aren't great, that she'll still like it. But boy, if she doesn't like the lyrics, it doesn't matter how cool the melody is.
Sure.
So I get it. I want to jump back to something we were talking about, and I for whatever reason, it came back to my mind because I lost it for a moment. But we were talking about the drummer that helped you with a little bit of production, the guy that moved to California. I wanted to ask, what kind of things do you get, or at least at that time, I'm sure it kind of changing and will continue to change, but what kind of things do you get stuck on in the production process?
So typically there's like a couple of, you probably aware of this, but there's typically a couple of different like stages of music writing, and they're typically different people do all of them. In today's era, you usually have an artist that kind of like makes a skeleton of the songs, like gets the lyrics and melodies kind of mostly there, and then they'll take that to their band, and the band will kind of fill in. Like the drummer will write his drum parts, bassist write his bass, and they'll kind of like put it all together. But the songwriter kind of built the skeleton, and then the other guys put in the different elements to build the body. And then the producer comes in and says like hacks off the stuff that doesn't need to be there, and maybe adds some spice. And then it goes to the mixing engineer. The mixing engineer tries to salvage what he can from the actual tracks, and then fills in the rest with synthesizers. And then it goes to the mastering engineer who like puts all the makeup on, and then boom, you have the person. Like that's usually how it goes. And there's advantages to having different people from that because there's also disadvantages because the original vision is 4 people away from the guy who actually originally created the being itself. And so, like I said, the advantage of kind of doing most of those roles yourself is that you can kind of keep a clear vision. And so, I focus heavily on songwriting, meaning like I have this idea, I have these visions, I just kind of write it out. Like, hey, I want this song. This is the message of the song. These are the ideas I'm trying to convey, and this is the feeling I'm trying to convey. Sometimes it'll be like, this song needs to feel blue. Like, this is the top of the song. I want the song, if you were to make visuals for it, it would be a blue, like, kind of well-lit song, or purple, or this is a forlorn, or this is a tense, uncomfortable, whatever. I kind of try to make adjectives that focus on feeling rather than musical aspects. Mm-hmm. And then I'll write the song. I'll kind of just build the skeleton, and at that point, like I usually have like this jumble of individual parts, and the individual parts are fine. They're cool. And they usually don't talk to each other very well. It's like, okay, I have a cool arm and I have a cool leg and I have a cool pelvis, but they don't actually connect. And so a producer, which is what I'm trying to like work with people now is helping me. I'm like, how can I transition between these things? What do I need to hack off? I have too many elements here, and they can kind of help me like fine tune and make sure that the vision that I'm trying to create, because I can tell them in words what it is, and the product that I actually created, I'm like, here's what I'm trying to do, and here's what I have. Help me see the disparity. Help me see where I failed here. Help me see where I need to like focus in or just ditch, And so that's kind of what a producer does, but there's not exactly a name for it.
Sure. So I guess the answer is it varies for you. Have you always gravitated toward writing or having a finished product that has the I guess I'll just describe it as like multi-layers of sounds versus doing things that are very stripped down with just maybe less instrumentation or changes? Have you always been kind of more of wanting to be adventurous with complexities and sounds?
Yeah, I mean, I keep trying to write simple music. It's hard. I write a simple song and then I'll look up like 3 weeks later and I got like 7,000 things on it. It's just like a natural tendency to me.
Sure.
Like, maybe it's just my personality a little bit too. That's a great question. I've thought about it a little bit. I don't have an answer for it other than I tend to gravitate to like, it's not over complexity, but I kind of view it as I want to do 10,000 little things that add up to the sum total as opposed to like 4 big things.
Yeah. And it's probably it's so easy and fun to do, relatively speaking, given the proper skill sets for doing it like you have. But I could see that there's a lot of temptation to put little, to keep adding little things. But, when I just listen to listen to the melodies of your lyrics, I hear a really elegantly simple melody. But then, when you listen to the whole, there's a lot of stuff going on, which is cool. But, even guys that some of my favorite, I think of Led Zeppelin and Jimmy Page, because clearly the guy was quite capable of playing very simple things, but the end of his records with that band were always very layered with a lot of different things going on. And then, out live, he had fun doing very basic things, or maybe out of complete necessity, because it just wasn't easy in his day to go out and make all those sounds live. But yeah, I was just curious, because when we were talking about production, because I would imagine a lot, tell me if I'm correct, that in a lot of the little things that come to your mind are because of your engineering / production talents as well. So you've got this great joy for songwriting, but you also have, seems like you're quite adept on the production front too. So am I right in saying, in speculating here that you get a lot of fun out of creating on the production side too?
Yeah, like I call it sound design, I guess it is.
Sure.
Like to me, you have just synthesis. Like we kind of just treat like synthesizers kind of get a bad rap because the 80s were a little bit corny with them, but they're just these tools where, especially if you kind of build these signal chains and connect these devices together, they end up having their own personalities and personas. And if you push them a little too hard, they start saying no or are doing things that you didn't expect. And like they make their own friction, to keep my metaphor going. So I really do like sound design, but what I'm trying to do, and I'm not sure this is actually ever happening, but this is the goal, and I think I'm getting better at it, is like have those complexities. So if somebody really wants to dig in and see those things that probably only I notice, these little details, and that I put there for a reason, they're there. But for the person who just wants a catchy melody and wants to dance or wants to have something that's accessible, that is there too. Because I'm trying to be that bridge between like that weird, crazy, like you do play music and listen to music for a long time. You start liking weird stuff. It's just because you start appreciating the detail.
Yeah.
But you would have never gotten to that weird stuff if there hadn't been I call them gateway bands that kind of like led you along the way to get there. And so in some ways I'm trying to be a gateway band to these like weirder aspects or darker aspects of music that I find joy in, but you can't start there. So I'm trying to use like pop as kind of a gateway drug to let people like grow into it. So I'm going to meet you where you are. I'm going to pander to you a little bit, and then I'm going to push you. I'm going to do some stuff that is completely accessible to you. And I'm going to do some stuff that's probably a little too much for you. But I've built that trust in trying to have that, like, speak your language a little bit, but I'm going to have an accent,
Well, I think you're doing a good job on the journey, because there is an elegant simplicity, like I mentioned about the melodies of your lyrics, and even in the music. But if you listen close enough, there's a lot going on. So I think you're doing a good job, and it's interesting to hear that it's still probably in an early stage of evolution for you. So it's it's cool.
I hope so.
So this is totally non-music related, but I think it might be. Well, it is kind of, but I think it might be interesting for other artists to know about, maybe. But this is going to be kind of funny a little bit. I noticed on some of your videos, which I think are some of the more recent ones, will have a still. It's basically a YouTube entry for the song, so it's really just kind of to listen. But you have a still frame, and then you're using a visualizer, which the latter part is what I wanted to ask you about. And I'm asking it because the use of visualizers in video is, I hear it being talked about as kind of a cool thing, even for podcasting. So I'd recently read, or maybe browsing by some webinar or something, where someone was talking about adding a visualizer to your podcast entry or video on YouTube, because for me, like mine get published on YouTube, but when I first started doing them, unbeknownst to me, my host was just gave me the ability to just let them auto publish it, and they do it really fast, and it's just the audio and the artwork for the frame, the video frame and the podcast. But anyway, I'd heard that the visualizers were a cool thing to use. And so anyway, is it something that you just recently started doing? What tool are you using for it? And are you even, or someone doing it for you?
No, I mean, I think it relates to like I've learned that if I post a video of me, or post the audio of me singing the song, it'll get 4 views. If I post the exact same thing, but just have me with video on it, it'll get 100. Like just that, having that visual, like I call it mixed media, which is like kind of like visual art term, but like you're able to communicate with 2 different ways, even if it's just a bunch of purple dots that bounce when the kick hits or whatever. So yeah, I'm experimenting with different stuff. The complicated and pain and will take you forever, but has unlimited flexibility is using After Effects, which is like Adobe's like visual effects software. I'm one of those people like, I need something done. Well, I can't find somebody to do it, or I'm too cheap to pay someone. Well, then I'll just spend 50 hours and learn how to do it myself and do a mediocre job. But I have more control that way. So After Effects is a complicated way to do it. There's actually this new software that I found that's far cheaper than After Effects, and it's probably a lot more what I'm looking for. It's called, it's got a horribly generic name, which makes it kind of hard to find, but it's called Magic, like Magic Visuals. And it's kind of like an object-oriented programming thing, but there's no programming. You just kind of drag boxes and you can connect things together, and it allows you to create like visualizations extremely quickly. So, and you can even do them live. So I'm actually like moving towards like having like a live video synthesis thing happening that actually responds. Like when I sing really loud on the mic, like the video will actually respond and change with it. So it's a visualization, but it's alive. But you can use it obviously not live as well. So that's actually probably where I'm going to be trending. But the stuff that's up there is mostly After Effects. Cool. I can't say I recommend it because it takes forever to learn and it's super expensive, but it works. So,
well, it's really, I think it's helpful to some artists, I'm sure, that will hear this episode, that what you said about you've noticed a jump in views. And to clarify, are you telling me like you've done some where it's like you're in the frame, you're singing, and I know you're probably exaggerating, you get like 4 views, and then for every 100 that you'll get with the visualizer? Okay.
But it's just the bigger mentality of like, every time you remove a sense or you remove some sort of human element from it, the harder it is for the person to connect to it.
Sure.
You remove one element of communication. It's really what it is.
At the same time, for perhaps for your benefit, I don't know, you may know this. Yeah, I won't take for granted that you don't already know this, but and I suppose it depends on your medium. You can be YouTube, but it's just in the way that you treat it. You could do a lot of these live things, which I see that you have done on Facebook and perhaps on Instagram as well. When you do live things where you're speaking to kind of, if not literally speaking to the camera, outside of just the context of the song and letting people in your weird little personal world, that will definitely get you some views because people are super interested. Partly as a marketer, but also in talking to so many musicians and watching them myself. Like everybody loves to see the personal, funny, weird stuff. You might be the greatest songwriter in the world, and perhaps you want to be perceived a specific way. But there's a certain group of people that will just. I mean, at the end of the day, people are. A lot of people are buying you as much as they are their music. So having some videos that do have your face in front of them can also. No,
I'd agree with that in the sense that like that's actually something I've been working on the last 6 months. Is like I work really hard to like I go over these things and re-edit my audio. Basically everything I do. Like my PR girl makes fun of me because like she's like, hey, I need a banner image for this show, and I'll spend an hour on it. It's just a banner image on Facebook for the show. That doesn't matter. It's like, dude, you are only allowed to spend 5 minutes on this because I want everything to be the best it can be. And which in some ways is cool, but it also can lead to me being a little inauthentic because it allows me to sometimes hide from things that I shouldn't be, that you can't hide from when you're live. There's like that authenticity and those intricacies of what make you a human. Like some people want to see,
Absolutely.
And I'm just, but it requires me seeing them as well. And I'm like, maybe I want to be accepted as well. I want you to focus. What if this distracts from this and this, like these worries that it's just insecurity. So I agree with you, and I'm scared of it. And I've just recently started like, well, you don't know, I don't know how to do it. Well, you're not going to know how to do it by not doing it. Just fail at it for a while and learn how to like get comfortable in front of the camera, you know?
Exactly.
I'm not there yet. But.
Exactly. It's really just about being yourself like you are right now. Just being yourself. There's this couple, I was after the wife for quite a while. I was really fascinated by her. She wrote a book on doing house concerts and house concert tours, and that's all she's focused on. Well, she'd recommended I talk to her husband too on the podcast, which I did, and I'm glad I did because I'm getting more insight into their business model for their artists. You know, music. He is a production engineer. He's also a musician and songwriter. But she's like he sees her as like the big voice. But I got a lot more insight into their business world. But interestingly, I think it was in speaking with her. Her name's Shannon Curtis, and I mention her name a lot on this podcast. But she made me realize that, you know, they've worked really hard to be just themselves. We hear the word authentic a lot, but it is just being yourself, right? With to build community around the art that they do. So as an example, one of the best examples she gave me is like the house concerts that she does are not, like, I don't know if you're very familiar with that ecosystem, but there are people who put on great house concert series shows, you know, annual things. They have a limited number of shows. People love going to them. They're a great experience. Mm-hmm. For Shannon, she doesn't have to work with those people. Not that there's anything wrong with working with them. She has built community largely on being herself with her husband, Jamie. And people are very interested in like every little weird thing they're doing. But these are people that already know and support the art that they're making. And the reason I tell the story or share this story with you is they're really on it. Man, they're so being just themselves and expressing their opinions, and they're just, you know, attracting people that are attracted to them. They won't attract the other ones, and that's okay. You can't get everybody, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a challenge, and I guess like my art for me is like, it's usually I'm working on some character flaw, and I use art as a experiment to try to examine. Like I used to write a lot of like heavy, scary, angry music when I was younger. And like I started trying to write music that wasn't overly aggressively and masculine because I was insecure about, you know, I'm a little dude, like I'm a soft person. So like I had like some masculinity issues I needed to examine. I was like, well, I can't approach this directly, but I'll try to write some, you know, slightly tender music, see how that goes, you know? Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to have like stick my toes into that and then kind of walk fully into it. The similar, what you're saying is like, I mean, I think as artists, it is our responsibility. Like, I need to examine, like, why am I not comfortable on the camera? Well, maybe because you don't see yourself the way you ought to. Maybe you're trying to see yourself a certain way, but it's false, and you're hiding. And if you're hiding, well, you probably need to examine that.
Yep, I feel you too, because I should be on video a lot more to talk about the podcast, talk about music, and I decided 2019 will be the year that I own it. So, hey, there is one other tool I wanted to tell you about, and I'm going to mention here for listeners, the visualization tool, which was the other reason I brought it up. I have been approached recently by a rep for a platform called the Big One Bitey Media, and they have music visualizers. I don't remember the cost, and it's
how do you spell that?
Big One Bitey, Bitey, thebigOneBitey.com. And I don't recall the cost yet. It wasn't huge, but it's not like super cheap, but it didn't, if I remember right, it wasn't super expensive. And it looks like starting at $29. And I don't know if that's a one-time or that's probably a monthly thing, right? I don't know. But so I was curious, and for maybe anyone who's listening to this, maybe that's one to check out too. I'm looking at it simply because they approached me about doing some affiliate stuff with them. I'm like, well, I've never used it. You need to let me use it because I'm not going to recommend something if I haven't used it. So I'm going to be checking it out. If you're interested, I'll let you know what I thought of it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I'm a big like DIY kind of person because like every time, like I said, unless you can have a team, and this is what we all want, and we probably don't get it very often. If we have a team that shares our vision, and you're able to let them drive a little bit, and they're able to make your vision happen. Cool, awesome. For the rest of us who don't have that, like, I mean, I'm a big fan of like, well, learn how to do it yourself. I mean, and if nothing else, even if you don't do it yourself, you'll understand better what to ask for from someone that is doing it. So if you have a little bit of technical know-how and you can say like, hey, I can't do this exactly like this, but this is kind of what I'm going for. And can you make sure to use this? Because then you understand the questions you're asking.
Yep.
It's like my other life is I'm a software developer, and I have these business guys that just say, hey, I want the website to feel blah. I'm like, that's not how web design works. You can't just. And so, but if I work with a client who has a little bit of technical know-how, they can kind of like, the questions they ask and the things they ask for are far more usually far more doable, because they understand a little bit more of what is tangible and what's realistic and what's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I would encourage people at least to try to do this themselves and spend some time just so they can understand what's going on.
Yep. I talk to a lot of artists that are doing everything themselves, so you're not alone. You're not alone for sure. Well, Cam, it has been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank your
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank your publicist for reaching out for me.
No, definitely. I really enjoyed this. Yeah, and we're on Instagram a lot, like you said, Instagram and Facebook and Spotify, iTunes, and all those other corporate overlords that we all use.
Yes, and it is at Smoke from All the Friction.
All the Friction.
Yeah, Smoke
from All the Friction.
Yeah, on both Facebook and Instagram. If you are looking for Cam and everything he's up to, he's also the band is Smoke from All the Friction is also on Spotify with the latest release, Transients. Cool, a lot of cool stuff on there, and I look forward to what you have coming at us in 2019.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you'll be hearing from me soon. Thanks, buddy.
All right, bye.
First met at the danger scene. Speaker fell to the floor in the middle of a scream. I picked it up and we danced so hard at the old house turned into a bar. Whoa. You speak, thought your words were strange. You were fine all by yourself next to the stage. I shadow matched your hair and I let you know. And we stayed out late while we loaded the cars. Took the make a walk, you said it wasn't too far. You sat by me there, but not too close. You were quick and funny. And we stayed out late. And we stayed out late. We all laughed for a bit, but the pen said bye. I asked if you knew where you'd be sleeping the night. You checked around and said probably your car. I offered my couch, you said I wasn't sketchy so far. To my home we went, I gave you a pillow and sheet. You mentioned cross and tattoo and asked what it means. A better glimpse of my heart, of fire and weakness. And we stayed up late, maybe 6 a.m. Just lost in ourselves and what that meant. And you said if that's all, well then that's a yes. You came to me close. We can stay up late. but to hear an echo of your soul, how could I resist? You understood more than the mere words I spoke. Our humble failures did begin to show. I resisted sleep, I had to hear more. The physical, but a glimmer of your aura. And we stayed out late while we loaded the cars. Took the haymaker walk, he said it wasn't too far. He sat by me then, but not too close. You were quick and funny. And we stayed up late, maybe 6 a.m. Just lost in ourselves, and what that meant. And you said if that's all, well then that's a yes. You came to me close, and we stayed up late. Oh, oh. We can stay up late. Oh, oh.
Hey, thanks for listening. Question for you. Are you struggling to move your music journey forward? I can help. If not personally, then by referring you to the next best available resources. Schedule a free 15-minute call with me to find out if I can indeed help you. It's easy. Just visit unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to schedule your call today. Look for links to just about everything covered in this episode in the show notes at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. It's available on paperback, Kindle, and ebooks just about everywhere you can find them. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy and would love it even more if you left a review. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.